In 69 BCE, a girl was born in the most dazzling city on earth. She would grow up to speak 9 languages, rule one of the ancient world's greatest kingdoms, and captivate the 2 most powerful men of her age. She was the last queen of Egypt. Tonight, we meet Cleopatra, the world she was born into. Cleopatra VI was born in 69 BCE into a world already old beyond imagining. Egypt had been a great civilization for 3,000 years before her birth. The pyramids were already ancient when she was a child. The Sphinx had watched the desert for 2 millennia. The gods of Egypt, Isis, Osiris, Ra, Horus, had been worshipped for longer than most other civilizations had existed. But the Egypt Cleopatra was born into was not the Egypt of the pharaohs. It was a kingdom under pressure. 100 years before her birth, the great conqueror Alexander the Great had swept through Egypt on his way to changing the world. He founded a new capital on the Mediterranean coast and named it, with characteristic modesty, after himself, Alexandria. When Alexander died young, his generals divided his empire among themselves. Egypt fell to a general named Ptolemy, and his descendants, the Ptolemaic dynasty, ruled Egypt for the next 3 centuries. The city of Alexandria. Alexandria was unlike any city the ancient world had ever seen. It was planned from the beginning as a statement, a declaration that a new kind of civilization had arrived. Its streets were laid out in a perfect grid, wide enough for 2 chariots to pass side by side. Its harbor was the busiest in the Mediterranean, crowded with ships from Egypt, Greece, Rome, Persia, and India. On a small island just offshore, the Pharos lighthouse rose to a height of over 100 meters, its mirror reflected flame visible 30 miles out to sea. But the true heart of Alexandria was not its harbor or its lighthouse. It was its library. The Great Library of Alexandria was the most ambitious intellectual project in the ancient world. Its founders set out to collect every book ever written, sending agents across the Mediterranean to buy, borrow, or copy any scroll they could find. Ships arriving in Alexandria's harbor were searched, and any books found on board were taken to the library to be copied before being returned. At its height, the library held perhaps 500,000 scrolls. Euclid developed geometry within its walls. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth there, correctly, to within a few hundred miles, using nothing but a stick, a shadow, and brilliant mathematics. Archimedes studied there. So did the astronomer Hipparchus, who mapped the stars with extraordinary precision. This was the city Cleopatra grew up in. This was the world that shaped her mind. A world where knowledge was power, where languages opened doors, where a queen who could speak to her people in their own tongue commanded a loyalty that no army could buy. She was, in every sense, a daughter of Alexandria. But by Cleopatra's time, the Ptolemaic dynasty was fading. Egypt was weak, divided, and increasingly overshadowed by a new power rising in the west, Rome. A queen fights for her throne. Cleopatra came to the throne at 18, ruling jointly with her younger brother Ptolemy I, as Egyptian tradition required. It did not go smoothly. Her brother's advisors, ambitious men who saw a young woman as easier to control, moved against her. Within a few years, Cleopatra had been driven out of Alexandria and into exile in the desert borderlands of Egypt, gathering an army, waiting for her moment. That moment came in the form of Julius Caesar. In 48 BCE, Caesar arrived in Alexandria, chasing his great rival Pompey across the Mediterranean. Cleopatra saw her opportunity. According to one of history's most enduring stories, she had herself smuggled into the palace rolled inside a carpet, or perhaps a linen sack, and delivered directly to Caesar's private chambers. Whether or not the story is literally true, what happened next is fact. Cleopatra and Caesar became allies, and then lovers. Caesar backed her claim to the throne. Her brother's forces were defeated. Ptolemy Zai drowned in the Nile while trying to flee. Cleopatra was queen. What was she like? This woman who so captivated the most powerful man in the world. Ancient sources tell us she was not conventionally beautiful, not by the standards of her time. What she possessed was something rarer: intelligence, charm, and a voice described by the ancient writer Plutarch as like a many-stringed instrument. She spoke 9 languages, including Egyptian, remarkable because most of her Ptolemaic ancestors had never bothered to learn the language of the people they ruled. She was a student of philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. She presented herself to her people not as a Greek ruler but as the goddess Isis incarnate, and they believed her. Antony and the Edge of the World. Caesar was assassinated in Rome in 44 BCE, and the Roman world fractured into civil war. From that war emerged 2 great rivals for power: Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, cold and calculating, and Mark Antony, Caesar's old general, passionate and brilliant. They divided the Roman world between them. Antony took the east, and the east meant Egypt. In 41 BCE, Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him at the city of Tarsus, in what is now southern Turkey. She came, but on her own terms. Plutarch describes her arrival in one of antiquity's most unforgettable passages. She sailed up the river on a golden barge, its purple sails perfumed with incense, its silver oars beating time to flutes and harps. She reclined beneath a canopy of gold cloth, dressed as Aphrodite, goddess of love, attended by boys dressed as cupids and women dressed as sea nymphs. The entire population of Tarsus, it was said, left the marketplace to watch her pass. Antony and Cleopatra became partners, in politics, in war, and in life. Together they dreamed of something extraordinary, a new kind of empire that would blend the Roman West with the Egyptian and Greek East. They had children together. They feasted and hunted and held elaborate ceremonies in which they presented themselves as gods. But Octavian, watching from Rome, saw only a threat. He waged a propaganda war against them, portraying Antony as a Roman who had gone native, seduced by an Eastern queen into betraying everything Rome stood for. In 31 BCE, the two sides met in a great naval battle at Actium, off the coast of Greece. Cleopatra and Antony lost. The last queen. They fled back to Alexandria, and there, in the summer of 30 BCE, everything ended. Antony, receiving a false report that Cleopatra was already dead, fell on his sword. He died in her arms. Octavian entered Alexandria. He had no intention of letting Cleopatra grace his triumph in Rome. The spectacle of the last queen of Egypt paraded through the streets in chains. Cleopatra, who had survived everything, who had ruled one of the ancient world's great kingdoms, who had matched wits with the 2 most powerful men of her age, made one final choice. She died by her own hand. Ancient sources say she used the venom of a snake, an asp, hidden in a basket of figs. The image is almost too perfect. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, dying as she had lived, on her own terms, as the incarnation of Isis, whose sacred symbol was the serpent. She was 39 years old. With her death, Egypt became a Roman province. The Ptolemaic dynasty ended. The 3,000-year story of the pharaohs was finally, completely over. But Cleopatra herself did not end. She became myth almost immediately. Poets wrote about her. Painters painted her. Shakespeare gave her some of the most beautiful lines in the English language. Elizabeth Taylor played her on screen in one of Hollywood's most spectacular productions. 2,000 years after her death, her name is still spoken, still debated, still wondered about. Because Cleopatra was not just a queen. She was the last guardian of an ancient world. And when she died, something irreplaceable died with her. A thread connecting the living present to a past so deep and so extraordinary that we have never stopped reaching back toward it. The desert wind still blows over Alexandria. The Nile still runs to the sea. And somewhere beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, where the ancient harbor has long since sunk, the golden barge of the last queen of Egypt quietly rests. If these stories carry you somewhere peaceful tonight, subscribe to Sleep and History, where the past becomes your most